Shalom. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai, Bahashem, Rakha Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabashai is what the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabashai. And pretty much this is going to be another video about the book of Ruth, because there's a lot of confusion about Ruth concerning what she Israelite. You got ISUPK, they're teaching that she was an Israelite, and the narrative that they come with is that, oh well, what man or woman in the scriptures, because remember in the Apocrypha they got Judith there, but Judith, obviously she's an Israelite, came from the tribe of Judah. So they like to use the narrative that, oh well, anytime you read the scriptures and you see a particular book or chapter named after somebody, it's referring to Israelites. So that's the narrative they come with, right? Now Ruth, obviously she was a Moabite, and I'm going to prove it through the scriptures. But one thing everybody needs to understand is the simple fact that no heathen has their own book in the scriptures. All right, that's supposed to be common sense. Once again, no heathen has their own book in the scriptures at all. All right, a heathen never had their own book in the Bible ever. The book of Ruth is a part of the book of Judges. It's a continuation of the book of Judges. When you literally read Judges 1 and 1, it literally comes right after the book of Judges. Why? Because it's a continuation of it. All right. Ruth, she wasn't an Israelite. Ruth's job was to bear seed for Israel. All right. And also Ruth, she was King David's mother, because through that line, right, Boaz, Jesse, David, it would have been born through Ruth. But obviously, they're Judites, because men carry the seed. Your nationality is determined by the seed of your father. When you read all throughout the scriptures, it goes into genealogies, the old system concerning the Levitical priesthood. You had to be a descendant of the sons of Aaron, and you had to have a record, because that was the custom to prove what tribe you come from, what part of the inheritance of the promised land of Israel belongs to you, right? All that's determined by the seed of your father. So, you need to understand that what? Ruth, she was King David's mother, and this story, Naomi, she was barren. She couldn't have kids, and that's where Ruth came in, all right? The scriptures, it calls Ruth a Moabite. That's what she was. So in the ancient world, that was our custom. If we had a wife that couldn't bring forth kids, right, she would give her handmaid to her husband. And then the husband, he would have sex with that handmaid, and she would bring forth his seed. All right. So in the ancient world, it was no such thing as, oh, you mix, you biracial, you look like this, you got all these. No, it's about the seed of your father. So now let's get into it, right? Let's read a little bit about this. So I typed in on Google, the book of Ruth is a continuation of the book of Judges. Yes, the book of Ruth is intrinsically, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I really don't care, right, linked to the book of Judges. It takes place during the same tumultuous era and serves as the thematic counterpoint and the historical bridge to the rise of King David. That's why I mentioned that earlier. So it's a continuation to the book of Judges. All right. The two books share the following specific connections. Time period. The book of Ruth explicitly opens by stating it takes place in the days when the judges rule. All right. It says, yeah, so that's pretty much it. The genealogical link. The story concludes by tracing the lineage by tracing the lineage of Ruth and Boaz directly through their son Obed and grandson Jesse to King David. Excuse me. It says, this acts as a prequel to 1 Samuel, showing how the Most High was preparing Israel's future royal line during the chaotic period of the Judges. Let's read this one now. Overview. Was Ruth a Moabite or Israelite? It says Ruth was a Moabite by birth. She was born and raised in the foreign nation of Moab. However, after the death of her first husband, an Israelite, she chose to leave her homeland and follow her mother-in-law, Naomi, to Judah. And remember, Naomi, she was barren. That's where Ruth came in. All right? It says, yeah, so that's pretty much it. I don't want to read that. So now we're going to start getting into some scriptures. Overview. Proof Ruth was a Moabite, right? It says proof that Ruth was a Moabite comes directly from the text of the book of Ruth in the Bible, where she is explicitly identified by her nationality multiple times, lived in the region of Moab, and was married to an Israelite man from Bethlehem. Ruth was not no Reubenite. This is what ISUPK teaches, because remember, Moab and Ammon, they used to border them Pacific tribes, which, you know, they was known as the men of Valor. I haven't read that in a while, but it was Reuben, Manasseh, and there was another tribe that was with them. You know, you could read it in the scriptures yourself. I think it's in Chronicles somewhere, right? So they used to go to war with Ammon and Moab a lot, all right? So that's the narrative ISUPK likes to say, but no, she was a Moabite. We're going to get the proof. It says biblical textual evidence, explicit labeling. The biblical narrator and characters call her a Moabite or Moabitess at least 6 times, starting as soon as she returns with Naomi. And then they got the precepts. All right? So let's start getting into some precepts, right? We're going to get into that. And then they got Ruth 1 and 22. We're going to get all these precepts that you see. Let's read a little more. It said geographical origin. Ruth 1 and 4 states that Naomi's sons married Moabite women, naming Oprah and Ruth after moving from Bethlehem to the country of Moab. It says leaving her homeland. Boaz acknowledges her background in Ruth 2 and 11, noting how she left her father, mother, and native land of Moab to come to an unfamiliar people. And when we're dealing with the heathen woman, they're supposed to come under our authority and worship our God. All right? They're supposed to worship Yahweh and Yahweh. They're supposed to keep our customs. We're not supposed to bow down to the heathen woman and their culture and customs. That's where we go off at and sin before the Lord. So now, let's kick it off with Ruth 1 and 1. So this is Ruth 1, and it's dealing with what? Naomi, widow. It says, now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. Let me read it again. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. See, if people just understood this part right here, it would be no confusion. You wouldn't think that she's an Israelite. It says, Ruth 1 and 1, now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, it's a continuation of the book of Judges, that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. All right? So it's letting you know. So I just want to get to the point. Ruth 1 and 4. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. So the scriptures is clearly telling you that they took wives of the women of Moab. And it's going to name Ruth. The name of one was Oprah, and the name of the other Ruth. All right? Just because it's called Ruth, that don't mean the story is about her. It's a continuation of the book of Judges. All right? And they dwelled there about 10 years. And if you want to read the whole account, you could. I just want to prove that she's a Moabite. All right? She's not an Israelite. So now, let's skip on down to Ruth 1 and 22. This is Ruth 1 and 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, all right? She's a Moabitess, meaning she comes from the seed line of Moab. It says, her daughter-in-law with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. All right, the scriptures is telling you that she's a Moabite. What's the next one they got for me? So we're going to go to the next chapter now. Ruth, the second chapter, right? Going to read that. Going to read verse 2 and then skip on down. So this is dealing with Ruth gleans and Boaz fields, right? Ruth 2 and 2. And Ruth the Moabitess, once again, it's telling you that Ruth, she's a Moabitess, right? Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, go, my daughter. Let's read in the NLT version. Ruth 2 and 3. No, Ruth 2 and 2, excuse me. It says, one day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it. Naomi replied, all right, my daughter, go ahead. Back to the KJV. Let's read verse 11 now. It says, I got to start up. Verse 10. Ruth 2 and 10. It says, then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace in thy eyes that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? She's clearly affirming throughout the story that she's a stranger, that she's a heathen. She's a natural Gentile. She is not an Israelite. All right? What's so hard to understand about that? Ruth 2 and 10 again. It says, then she fell on her face, bowed herself to the ground, and said unto him, why have I found grace in thy eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? She's a stranger. All right? She don't come from the stock of Israel. She's a Moabitess. Verse 11. It says, and Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath fully been shewed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thy husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity. What's the land of her nativity? Moab. She's a Moabitess. And are come unto a people which thou knowest not heretofore. Meaning what? She's a heathen. She's a Moabite. Come on, like what is ISUBK reading? Let's read the NLT version to that. This is Ruth 2 and 11. Yes, I know, Boaz replied, but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. She was never an Israelite. She don't got no ancestors or descendants in the land of Israel. Why? Because she is born and raised in Moab. I mean, damn. Let's go back. So now let's get Ruth. Let's see. Oh, I got to read verse 21. Let's see what that says. This is Ruth 2 and 21. And Ruth the Moabitess said, he said unto me also, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. It's clearly affirming that what? She is a Moabitess. All right. Let's get Ruth, the 4th chapter. All right. Ruth 4 and 5. And then I could go on down to 10. And this is going to be a quick video. The marriage of Ruth. This is Ruth chapter 4 at verse 5. It says, then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the land of Naomi, that thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Let's skip on down to verse 10. It says, moreover, Ruth the Moabitess. Like the scriptures, they keep affirming it. Ain't no heathen got their own book when you read the scriptures. The wife of Mahlon have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place ye are a witness unto this day. All right. So it's clearly telling you that she's a Moabitess. She even acknowledged herself as being a stranger. All right. So that's pretty much it, man. Let's see. Because this was her purpose, to raise seed unto Israel. Let me read this part. Actually, no, I don't got to read all this. All right. The point is, through her, that's where you get David in verse 22. And Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. That was her purpose. All right. So, quick lesson. Lord willing, you was edified. Shalom.